The old woman always arrived before sunrise. By the time the first office workers started showing up on Maple Street, she was already there, sitting on the low concrete step outside the entrance of the Caldwell Tower, a 12-story office building in the middle of downtown Atlanta. She wore the same things every day: a long dark green cardigan that was too big for her, a faded floral blouse underneath, wide-legged gray pants, and a pair of brown slip-on shoes worn thin at the sole. She kept a small cloth tote bag on her lap, held with both hands, like it contained something precious. Her name was Ruth. She was 68 years old. Her hair had gone fully white, and she wore it in a short, natural style that framed her dark brown face. Her eyes were the kind of eyes that missed nothing: quiet, steady, watching. Nobody who walked into that building every morning knew her name. Nobody asked. The security guard occasionally told her she couldn't sit there. She would nod pleasantly, stand up, walk to the corner, wait until he went back inside, and return to the step. Eventually, he stopped trying. The office workers walked past her the way people walk past things they have decided not to see, all except one. Her name was Cora Vasquez, 29 years old, the daughter of a Puerto Rican father and an Irish-American mother. Warm tan skin, dark wavy hair she kept pulled back in a loose knot, the kind of tired eyes that come from working 2 jobs and not sleeping enough. She wore the same rotation of practical clothes every week: dark uniform pants, a gray zip-up hoodie she'd had for 4 years, and white sneakers she kept clean out of habit. Cora had worked as a janitor at the Caldwell Tower for 3 years. She came in at 6 in the morning and left at 2 in the afternoon, and she was always the first person through the front door, which meant she was always the first person to see Ruth. The first morning Cora noticed her, she almost walked past. Maybe it was the way Ruth was sitting, not slumped, not defeated, just very still, watching the street with those sharp, quiet eyes, like she was studying something. Cora had a brown paper bag in her hand, a small sesame roll and a black coffee, just enough to get through the first few hours. She looked at the bag. She looked at Ruth. She tore the roll in half and held out one piece. Ruth looked at her hand, then at her face. "You don't have to do that," Ruth said. "I know," Cora said. "I want to." Ruth took the bread. She held it for a moment before eating it, like she was remembering something. "Thank you," she said. Cora nodded and went inside. The next morning, Cora bought 2 rolls. She didn't make a big deal of it. She just sat on the step beside Ruth for 5 minutes before her shift started, handed her the second roll, and they sat quietly while the city woke up around them. The morning after that, same thing. By the end of the first week, it had become a habit. By the end of the first month, it had become something else, something closer to a friendship, the kind that grows between people who are very different on paper, but who, sitting on a cold concrete step with bread and early morning air, find that they understand each other just fine. Ruth talked about growing up in Savannah, about a garden her mother kept with tomatoes and sweet potatoes and herbs for cooking, about her late husband James, an electrician with a laugh that filled whatever room he was in. Married 31 years before he died on a Wednesday morning while she was making breakfast. And she talked about her son. His name was David, 35, smart, hardworking, built like his father. She said it the way a person says something that has a but coming. "He works very hard," Ruth said one morning, not looking at Cora, looking at the street. "He has everything. Big apartment, nice car, more money than he knows what to do with, but he doesn't know yet what any of it is for." "What do you mean?" Cora asked. "Every woman he brings home," Ruth said slowly, "I can see it in their eyes within 5 minutes. They're not looking at my son, they're looking at what my son has, and he can't see it. He thinks he can, but he can't." "He'll figure it out," Cora said finally. Ruth looked at her with those sharp, quiet eyes. "That's what I'm hoping," she said. What Cora noticed, over time, was that Ruth was changing. Not dramatically, just in small ways. She was coughing more. Her hands shook slightly when she held her coffee cup. Some mornings she looked like she hadn't slept. Some mornings she looked like she hadn't eaten before Cora showed up with the bread. One Thursday in October, Ruth wasn't on the step. Cora stood there for a moment, looking at the empty space. Then she went inside and did her shift. But she thought about it all day. The next morning, Ruth was back, but she looked worse. Her face was pale. She was moving slower. "Are you okay?" Cora asked, sitting beside her. "Just a little under the weather," Ruth said, with the particular calmness of someone who is not being entirely honest. "Do you have somewhere warm to go?" Ruth smiled. "I have a place." Cora wrote her own phone number on a napkin and gave it to her. "Call me if you need anything," she said. Ruth looked at the napkin. Then she folded it and put it carefully in her tote bag. 3 days later, Ruth called. Her voice was thin, thinner than Cora had ever heard it. She said she was sorry to bother her. She said she wasn't feeling well and she couldn't quite manage dinner. Cora was still in her work clothes. She stopped at a small grocery store on her way, bought soup ingredients, bread, some medicine for a cold, and went to the address Ruth gave her. The house was a small rental on a quiet street. Not much, but clean. Lived in. There were framed photos on the windowsill, a plant on the kitchen counter still being watered, books stacked neatly beside the bed. Cora made soup, helped Ruth take her medicine, sat with her while she ate, washed the bowl and left it to dry. "I'll come back tomorrow," Cora said, pulling on her jacket. "You don't have to do that," Ruth said from the bed. "I know," Cora said. She was already at the door. "Get some sleep." She came back every day after that. After her shift ended at 2, she stopped at whatever store made sense on the way, picked up what Ruth needed, and spent 2 or 3 hours at the small house. She cooked simple things, picked up prescriptions, changed the sheets when Ruth's fever broke, read to her when Ruth's eyes were too tired for the books on the nightstand. They talked more during those hours than they had in all the months on the step outside the building. Ruth asked about Cora's family. Cora told her about her father, who had come from Puerto Rico with $40 and a trade skill and built a small but decent life. Her mother, who called every Sunday without fail. The job. The night classes she took when she could afford them. "What would you study?" Ruth asked one evening, while Cora folded laundry at the end of the bed. "Interior design," Cora said quietly, like she was slightly embarrassed by it. "I like thinking about spaces, about how a room makes people feel when they walk into it." Ruth looked at her. "That's not a small thing," she said. "That's important work." Cora shrugged. "It's expensive, and I'm not sure I'm—" She stopped. "You're not sure you're what?" Ruth asked. Cora was quiet. "Good enough," she said. Ruth made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "The most capable people I've ever known," she said, "were the ones who spent the most time wondering if they were capable enough. The people who never wonder about it are usually the ones you have to watch." It was on a Wednesday evening, about 3 weeks into Cora's daily visits, that David found his mother. He had hired someone to look for her. Ruth had been gone for 4 months. No calls, no messages. Only a short letter she'd left on his kitchen counter that said, "I'm fine. I need some time to see something clearly. Don't worry." David had worried every single day. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his mother's same steady dark eyes. He wore a dark gray wool coat over a white shirt, dark trousers, leather shoes. He parked half a block from the house and walked the rest of the way because he didn't want to startle her. He stood outside the door for a moment before knocking. He could hear voices inside, his mother's slower and quieter than he remembered, and another voice, a woman, younger, the sound of something being moved in the kitchen, water running, ordinary sounds. He knocked. Cora answered the door. She was still in her work hoodie, hair partly loose from its knot, a dish towel over one shoulder, a slightly surprised expression. They looked at each other for a second. "Can I help you?" Cora asked. "I'm looking for Ruth," he said. "I'm her son." Cora let him in. Ruth was sitting in the armchair by the window, a blanket across her lap, a cup of tea beside her. When she saw David, she went very still. Then she exhaled, slowly, like she'd been holding something for a long time. David crossed the room and crouched in front of her chair and took both her hands in his. He didn't say anything for a moment. He just looked at her face. "You could have called," he said. "I know," she said. "I was worried sick. I know that too." His eyes moved around the room, the modest furniture, the thin curtains. Then to Cora. standing quietly in the kitchen doorway. "Who is this?" he asked. "This is Cora," Ruth said. "She's been taking care of me." David looked at Cora properly for the first time. She was standing with the dish towel still on her shoulder, looking calm and slightly uncertain, the way people look when they're not sure if they're supposed to stay or go. "You work here?" he asked. Cora shook her head. "I'm a janitor, at the Caldwell Tower." She paused. "I met your mother on the front step." David looked back at his mother. "You've been sitting on the front step of the Caldwell Tower?" Ruth smiled at him. "It's a good step," she said. "Very educational." David stayed that evening. Cora made dinner, a simple rice and bean dish with chicken and peppers. She set 3 plates without thinking about it, and then caught herself and looked at David like she was waiting for him to object. He didn't object. They ate together at the small kitchen table. Ruth asked Cora questions about the design classes, about the morning bread, and Cora answered, and David listened. And something in the room shifted very slightly, the way temperature shifts when a window opens. After dinner, while Cora cleaned up and Ruth rested, David sat at the kitchen table. "How long have you been coming here?" he asked quietly. "About 3 weeks," Cora said, not turning around from the sink. "Every day?" "Every day after my shift." He was quiet for a moment. "Does she pay you?" Cora turned around and looked at him with an expression that was not quite offended, but was close to it. "No," she said simply. "She's my friend." David held her gaze for a second. Then he looked down at the table. "I see," he said. He came back the next evening, and the one after that. He didn't explain why. He just showed up, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with nothing, and sat with his mother, and by extension, with Cora in the small kitchen of the house on Westview Street. Ruth watched all of it with those sharp, quiet eyes and said very little. One night, after she'd gone to bed early, and David and Cora were sitting at the kitchen table with the remains of dinner between them, David said, out of nowhere, "My mother has money." Cora looked at him. "I figured," she said. He looked at her now. "You figured?" "The way she talks," Cora said, "the way she thinks about things, the way she watches people. That's not someone who's been struggling their whole life." He was quiet. "She doesn't have a little money," he said carefully. "She has a lot. Several companies. Including, as it happens, the building where you work." Cora was quiet for a second. She looked at the table. Then she looked at him. "Okay," she said. "That's all?" he asked. "What do you want me to say?" Cora said. "It doesn't change anything. She's still your mother. She still needed soup 3 weeks ago, and she still drinks her tea with 2 sugars and no milk." David looked at her for a long moment. He had spent 3 years watching women perform their best versions of themselves in front of his mother, laughing at the right moments, saying the right things, always angling. Cora wasn't angling, she was washing a pot. He looked away before she noticed him staring. Ruth recovered slowly but steadily over the following 2 weeks. One afternoon when David arrived and Ruth was asleep, Cora was in the small living room with a library book open in her lap. Not reading it, just looking out the window. David sat across from her. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure." "Why did you start giving her bread in the first place? On the step, before you knew anything about her?" Cora thought about it. "Because she was there," Cora said finally. "And nobody else was stopping, and it didn't cost me much to stop. That's the whole reason?" Cora looked at him. "What bigger reason would you need?" He didn't have an answer for that. The morning Ruth was well enough to go back outside. She asked Cora to walk with her. They walked to the corner bakery. Ruth stood at the counter and ordered 2 sesame rolls and 2 coffees, black for Cora with 2 sugars for herself, and paid for them herself. Then they walked to the Caldwell Tower and sat on the front step. It was early. The street was still quiet. The sky was the pale blue-gray of a morning that hadn't fully decided to be a morning yet. They sat for a while without talking. Then Ruth said, "I left home because I was tired of watching people pretend. Tired of not knowing what was real. My son is a good man. But he'd been surrounded for so long by people who wanted things from us that he'd started to forget what it looked like when someone didn't." She took a sip of her coffee. "So I came here, and I sat on this step, and I watched. And for 3 months, You were the only person who stopped. Cora looked at her. You were testing people? She asked. Ruth made that sound that was not quite a laugh. I was learning, she said. There's a difference. She looked at the street. I learned that most people walk past things they've decided not to see, she said. And I learned that the ones who stop, they don't stop because they have extra to give. They stop because they can't not stop. It's in who they are. She looked at Cora. That's not something I can teach my son, but maybe I can show him. 2 weeks later, Cora got a call from the building management office of the Caldwell Tower. She was told that the owner of the building had put forward a request, an internal scholarship program, fully funded, for employees who wanted to pursue further study. Cora's name had been specifically noted as the first recipient. She stood in the hallway of her apartment building and held the phone for a long time after the call ended. She called Ruth. Ruth answered on the second ring. I think I just got offered a scholarship, Cora said. I think you did, Ruth said. Did you? Yes. Cora didn't say anything for a moment. You didn't have to do that, she said. I didn't help you because of... I know, Ruth said. That's why I did it. A pause. The bread, Cora said. The bread, Ruth agreed. A month later, David asked Cora to have coffee. Not at the small house, not with his mother there, just the two of them. At the corner bakery on Maple Street, a small table by the window. He arrived first and ordered 2 coffees. Black for her, he'd noticed, and 2 sesame rolls, because he thought that was the right thing to do. Cora sat down. She looked at the rolls. You didn't have to do that, she said. He smiled slightly. I know, he said. I wanted to. She looked at him, and then she laughed, really laughed, for the first time since he'd met her. A real laugh that started somewhere genuine and wasn't trying to be anything. He watched her and thought about what his mother had said. She had been surrounded so long by people who wanted things that he had forgotten what it looked like when someone didn't. He was starting to remember. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in April, Cora walked into the Caldwell Tower through the front entrance for the first time not as a janitor. She wore a dark blazer over a simple white blouse and black trousers. Her hair was down for once, falling in loose waves. She carried a portfolio under one arm. She had been accepted to an interior design program at Georgia Tech, full scholarship. She paused just inside the revolving doors. She looked at the front step through the glass. Empty this morning, but she could see it clearly. The low concrete step, the place where she had first stopped, first torn a roll in half, first sat beside a small woman in a green cardigan who watched the street with sharp, quiet eyes. She looked at it for a moment, then she went inside. Ruth was waiting in the conference room on the 3rd floor, sitting at the head of the table in a way that, now that Cora knew who she was, made complete sense. She wore a deep burgundy blazer over a crisp white blouse, her white natural hair framing her face. She looked every inch of what she was, a woman who had built things and knew how to sit in a room full of people and be completely certain of her ground. David was beside her, charcoal suit. He put away his phone when Cora walked in. You look good, he said. Cora set her portfolio on the table. Thank you for the scholarship, she said to Ruth. Ruth looked at her. I didn't give you a scholarship, she said. I gave you a door. Slow. You're the one who walked through it. Cora sat down. She opened her portfolio. Okay, she said. So here's what I think we could do with the lobby. Later, after the meeting, Ruth and Cora stood on the front step of the Caldwell Tower together for a few minutes before going their separate ways. The city moved around them the way it always did. Fast, loud, full of people somewhere between where they had been and where they were going. You know what I found out sitting here every morning? Ruth said. What? Most people are moving too fast to see what's right in front of them. Cora looked at the street. I almost walked past you, she said. But you didn't, Ruth said. No. Ruth reached into her tote bag, the same small cloth bag she'd carried every day on the step, and took out 2 sesame rolls wrapped in paper. She held one out to Cora. Cora took it. They sat on the step for a few minutes, in the middle of the morning, in the middle of the city. 2 women who had found each other in the smallest possible way, half a roll of bread on a cold concrete step, and who had, without planning it, changed what the other's life was going to look like. From inside the lobby, through the glass, David watched them for a moment before turning back toward the elevator. He was smiling. Some things start very small, half a roll of bread, 5 minutes on a cold step, one person who couldn't walk past, and somehow, from something that small, everything else grew. Pay attention to who is sitting on the steps around you. You never know whose mother you might be feeding. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. And tell us in the comments, have you ever done something small for a stranger that turned out to mean more than you knew?